Hi everyone, I am Lichtenstein, one of the rabbis here on the Upper East Side, and we are very, very excited to welcome all of you here to the 5th annual Daniella Moffson Teshuva lecture. For the past 5 years, the Moffson family and the foundation have been immensely generous in keeping their daughter's memory alive by sponsoring a lecture during 10 days of repentance between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of words of inspiration to really get us in the proper mindset for the holy days. And I'm going to invite Michael to share a few words and introduce our guest speaker this evening.
Allow me to introduce our guest speaker, Dovid Lichtenstein. Dovid has a very successful career, successful business guy. He's a major philanthropist, he's a writer, he does podcasts. This guy seems to do it everything. And what's impressive is that throughout this illustrious career, he's maintained his commitment to Yiddishkeit. And when I did a quick look at Wikipedia, I was pleasantly surprised to see that they describe you as Haredi. I didn't realize that Haredi was part of the parlance of Wikipedia. Rather than focus on your background, his background, and multiple achievements, I want to focus on what David did tonight. I didn't ever recall of a rabbi, rather a businessman, busy businessman, taking the time to give a shir to arguably a group of strangers, a shir to.
Welcome. Thank you all. I'm going to make a few points that I hope instead of a speech, it's more of, hey, I think I got some clarity, or I came away with something. And I want to start off with, by the way, thanking everybody for coming, hope we should be Elias Nishmas of Daniella Moffson. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so she must have been special. We go through life, we often understand topics or Yom Tovim like we did when we were little. And what was Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur about? It was about dip the apple in the honey. Or maybe when you got to 6th grade, not to speak Lashon Hara. As we get older, we would sense that there's something greater happening on these days of awe, on these high holy days, that go straight to our soul, besides sort of tidbits, and come to Shul on time and say the Al-Chaitz. There should be a message here, a deeper message here, and I'd like to share that with you. And I'd like to start by asking a question. The obsession with death that we seem to have on the high holy days. Mi yichya and mi yamos. Mi bakitzo, mi lo bakitzo. Mi ba'esh, mi ba'mayim, mi ba'chayim, mi ba'magefa, mi ba'cherev. I mean, it's an obsession with death. And there's something, on the other hand, Rosh Hashanah, when we say all these tefillos, you're not allowed to cry. There's no tshuva and no al-chaitz. So there's joy mixed with an obsession of death. It seems like an odd mixture. Let me suggest, everybody here this year was witness to the story of the Titan submersible. Right, where a fellow by the name of Stockton Rush was just enamored, infatuated with the Titanic. And he took this submersible and he basically cut every corner he could. And he got 5 very wealthy people to spend $250,000, and it sank and imploded. And I thought it just imploded and that was it. And then James Cameron of Titanic fame, who was also enamored with it, actually did an entire study. And he came out with, he said the electricity cut off around 45 minutes into the journey. And at that point, he said the rudder stopped working, so it became total blackness, and they pitched head forward down into the depths of the ocean. And he said there was probably a warning that said that if the surface gets breached, there could be an implosion, right? So they had 45 minutes until the breach actually happened. And I ask you, what do you think they were thinking about during those 45 minutes? Now it's nose forward, which means everybody's pitched into the front of it, and it's going down, and there's a light flashing, implosion may be occurring. Do you think that they were thinking about some date that they missed? Or maybe a business deal, a partner didn't take them into a deal, right? Were they thinking about where they're going on their next vacation? I don't know, I tend to doubt it. You know, at that moment in time. But here's something else that's really scary. All of us are going to one day have that moment. Hopefully it won't be in a submersible, and hopefully it'll be at 120 years. But nobody's escaped it. And the question is, what will we be thinking at that time? And I put to you, and I'm going to elaborate on this, that our obsession with death is because of our love for life. Right? That's going to be sort of the thesis. Now let me start at the beginning. In other words, when you know that everything is finite and it's how precious it is, let's have an obsession. We should be obsessed with our time. Let's start with the beginning. The High Holy Days start with ROSH HASHANAH. Now, the name is an oxymoron. That's a contradiction. Because what does ROSH mean? Anybody? A beginning. The beginning of. What does Shana mean? Shana means a cycle. Whenever we see the word shinun in Hebrew, it means a cycle. It starts with shnayim, means two, where one starts repeating itself. When you say vishinantam levanecha, you're going to hopefully say Shema with your children for many years, every single night. A tooth is called a shane because it chews. So a shana means a cycle, repetitive, goes around and around and around and around. So I ask you, most of you have took geometry in high school, does a circle have a beginning?
No.
A line has a beginning, right? A circle does not have a beginning. In fact, if you take any section out of a circle, the tiniest fragment of it, and you have a protractor, you can predict absolutely exactly what the remainder of the circle will look like. So a circle is about repetitive. It's about the inevitable. It's about a lack of choice, right? And Rosh means beginning. So we're asked to celebrate an absurd holiday, almost an impossible holiday. The circle that has a beginning. That is the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, right? And by the way, it's not only by Rosh Hashanah we have this concept. The portion of the Torah that talks about beginnings, bikurim, the beginning of the harvest, the first fruit. So the Balaturim, he lived in the late 1300s. He was the son of the ROSH. He says that in the entire parsha of Bikurim, the letter Samach does not appear once. He says it's every other letter of the alphabet. But Samach does not. He says because Samach is about a circle. And Bikurim is about beginnings. And he says, and you cannot have a circle when you're making beginnings. He just says it as a very simple, right? Case in point. So let me go to the Shana part of it, not to the Rosh part of it. Newton's first law of energy. Anybody know what it is? Any object in a trajectory will stay in that trajectory forever. This is in outer space, right? That's when he spoke about gravity. Gravity is a greater force, but where you don't have gravity, will stay in that trajectory forever unless acted upon by a greater force. First law, Newton's first law of energy. And why is that relevant to us? Because I'm subject to Newton's first law of energy. I grew up when I was 4 years old. My parents chose my kindergarten. And they then chose my grade school. Now, once they choose your grade school, they're really choosing your high school because they're choosing your friends by picking your grade school. Your friends and your parents together and all that societal force is going to pick your high school. And then it's going to pick your graduate school or your yeshiva if you went to Israel, right? And ultimately, it will even choose your mate. Now, you think you're making free choice here, but it's really predetermined, and it started when you were 4 years old. So just like in matter, we have the concept of object placed in a trajectory will stay there unless acted on by a greater force. So too in our lives. Sometimes to our benefit and sometimes not, right? We are placed in a trajectory. And very little of our lives, and when I say I don't mean just us, I mean the world in general. Talk to an Asian, like, wow, I mean, the tiger moms. I mean, you're in a trajectory, you think you're making choices, everything's been made for you, right? By the way, who wrote about this at Lens? Whoever read Kafka's The Metamorphosis? What is The Metamorphosis about? I forgot, Gene something or other his name was. He wakes up one day and he's a cockroach or a bug in a trap. And what's the concept, the whole concept of the book? Here's a person, because of financial obligations, and we know what those are. He had to earn a living at a very young age to support his parents. And so he loses any sort of identity, and in fact, it's dehumanizing. When we're in that cycle, it's often dehumanizing. And what is it because of? It could be societal expectations, society's predefinition of success, of roles, of norms. You have to fit in. And if you don't fit in, what happens? Ostracization. You know, it's not comfortable to be the outcast. Judgment. Who over here has ever been judged, felt that they're subject of judgment? Only one person. That's wonderful. I could say I have. Right? You know, the current kings, the power of societal judgment, the current king of England's grandmother was Queen Charlotte of Denmark. She became the Queen of England for 9.5 years. She's the great-grandmother of the current king. And when she had her second child, she got an infection in her hip, which today they'd probably give antibiotics for, or maybe steroids, but they didn't have it then. So she limped, and she was admired, and she limped, the queen limped, so her ladies-in-waiting limped. And after her ladies-in-waiting limped, all the fancy women in England limped. And after the fancy ladies limped, the pedestrian, right, the bourgeois women limped. You could Google this. For 9.5 years that she was queen, all the women in England limped. Right? What is that called? That's called societal expectations and pressure. So it's just not you and me, right? What could it be? It could be family pressure. Our parents, we don't want to disappoint them. You know, kabed es avicha v'esimecha. By the way, just, I could tell you, kabed avicha v'esimecha does not mean do what your parents want. It means respect them. But people don't understand it. It doesn't mean give your parents nachas. It means respect and honor your parents. But you're not supposed to be a prisoner to your parents. And Shulchan Aruch states this way: parent does not have a right to tell a child who to marry. The child does not work for the parent, isn't a slave of the parent. They have to respect their parent. So, but peer pressure, family pressure, tensions in relationships, how often drive our needs. I would love to do this. I can't. I had a friend. He was he had no interest in medicine, and his parents wanted him to go into medicine, right? And he was a fabulous artist. He was always drawing, and he said, I want to go into. So he went to college, and then he took the MCATs, and he remembers, he says, I'm telling my mother tonight that I'm not going to medical school. David, I'm telling my mother tonight. And he came home. So I said the next day, how did it go? He says, when I said I'm not going to medical school, she fainted. And they had to call Hatzalah. And she woke up and she said, he's not going to medical school? And where do you think he went?
No.
He went to medical school, right? Until today, when I see him, after a beer or two, he cries how he wishes he had become an artist. Felt he had. And again, we spoke about financial pressure. Who over here has ever felt pressured to do something because of financial pressure? They said, that's not really me. Right? Anybody? What did Schopenhauer say? The definition of a married man is one who will do anything for money. Okay. The need for acceptance. I mean, we see the need for acceptance. It's all the girls with the puffy lips. Whenever they say, I just say, oh my goodness, like they bought in. They just, it's. But what did he say? What did Newton say? He said, every object in a trajectory will stay in that trajectory until acted on by a greater force. What does the Rambam write about Tkiyas Shofar, which starts the Aseres Yemei Tshuva? The language of the Rambam is, Uru Yushenim Meshinaschem. Wake up. Wake up. I Googled the things that need annual checkups. And there's actually a site. And you need an annual checkup physically. Your car needs an annual checkup. Do you know that you have to annually check your air conditioning filters and your heating filters? It doesn't say anywhere about, hey, did you really choose, when you were 18, is this really the life you were thinking about you should be leading? There's never an annual checkup. And let me tell you a story. In the mid-1800s, there was a very rich man. He was a true genius, and a Musk-style genius. He had 350 different patents registered, and he was the most successful arms manufacturer in Europe. He lived in Sweden, right? He had patents for dynamite, gelinite, nitroglycerin, and he woke up one morning, he was 62 years old, and his butler brought him his coffee and a newspaper. And he read through the newspaper, and the last page is obituaries, just like it is today. We hide them in the back because we don't want to think, that anybody ever dies in our society. The opposite of what we do, right? And he was astonished. There was an obituary there for him. His brother had died, and the newspaper had made a mistake. They thought he had died. And the title of the obituary was, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." Because all his patents were for military, he held a patent, which is still used, how to aim a mortar over long distances. Dynamite is still used, gelinite is still used, nitroglycerin, right? The Merchant of Death. And in the article it said, the world is a better place today. A black cloud has been lifted off the world as we know it because the Merchant of Death is dead, right? And this man said, that can't be my legacy. 62 years old, that's the last, that can't be my legacy. So he was a brilliant person. He got a few advisors, he came together, and he came up with an idea. He would put all his money into a trust, and the trust would be for the benefit of mankind. And what was the man's name? Alfred Nobel. The Nobel Prize for medicine, for science, for physics, etc., right? Here's a man who, he was on a very strong trajectory, and what happened? A greater force, right, changed the trajectory. And what was that greater force? His obituary, right? And that's a greater force. And he died a year later at 63, but he had already put everything in. He had started the amazing story, right? So I want to put to you, most of us, I would say everybody, have dreams. But what happens to these dreams? They become light particles trapped in matter. The Gemara says on Rosh Hashanah, Yosef was released from prison after 12 years. Rosh Hashanah, Yatsa Yosef mi Beis Hasurim. In some communities they say Eidus b'Yosef. Some may Eidus b'Mitzrayim. They use that capital in Tehillim as a thing. What's the meaning of on Yosef left jail, prison, on Rosh Hashanah after 12 years? It's a coincidence. It's happened on Rosh Hashanah. I think, what is Yosef known as? Mi bal hachalomos hazeh. Yosef is the little boy who had dreams. When he dreams, v'hinei anachnu ma'almim alumim b'toch hasada, v'hinei kama aluf masi v'gam nitzava, v'tashtichavena kalal mosechem alum masi. He has dreams. He has spiritual dreams. What's the first dream of Yosef? All the sheaves will circle me, my shield, and they will bow down to me. Now, in an agrarian society, when we say all the sheaves are bowing down, what are we saying? That's the equivalent today of being the great tech, the guy, in an agrarian society, he is the Steve Jobs. All of you will bow down to me. And what's his second dream? All the celestial bodies in heaven are there. And here's my celestial body. And all the celestial bodies are bowing to my celestial body. These are spiritual dreams. We all have spiritual dreams. And what happens to Yosef? They die. He's sold as a slave to the flesh pots of Mitzrayim, or seemingly they die. And then he interprets dreams in prison. He's in prison for 12 years. But on Rosh Hashanah, he leaves prison. The dreamer has left his prison. Rosh Hashanah is the day we speak about what should our avoda be on Rosh Hashanah. Is it Lashon Hara? Is it dip the apple? Rosh Hashanah is our journey towards letting our dreams out of prison. Now, I know what you're thinking, many of you. I'm too old for this. I'm retired already. Right? I was years ago. But think of who the two readings that we do. We read the story of Sarah. How old was Sarah when her dream came true? She was 90. And I think there's a message there. The barren, what is the barren woman? It's a metaphor for the person who has a dream that hasn't come home yet, but it happens at 90. And who's the other dreamer? Hannah. Hannah is the woman who has no children. And one year, after coming every year, right, to the Bet HaMikdash, she says, I'm storming the walls. I'm going into the men's shul. I'm going right up to the Aron. I'm not, and Eli tries to stop her. I mean, who's this mad woman? Now here's the question. Why did she wait this long to storm the fort? Why didn't she do it? This is going on for decades. What happens right before? Her husband tells her, he says, Hannah, stop. I love you more than my other wife. I love you more than all my other children. Just accept your reality. Your dream won't happen. And what does she say? That's not happening. And she changes reality. She goes and she prays, and she had no womb, and God gave her a womb. So she turns around the whole concept of prayer, praying for the impossible. So here are 3 people who had miracles on Rosh Hashanah, and all of them had one thing in common. They let their dreams out of prison. And how do we do that? We can only do that one way, by somehow finding the beginning to the circle. By somehow finding how Rosh and Shana can work together. How do we get out of that vicious cycle, trapped where I am, stuck? And how do I create a new beginning? And that is the challenge of the 10 days of Teshuva here in front of us. And by the way, I knew a man, a current day Sarah. His name was Bernie Landa. Did anybody know him? Bernie Landa founded Touro College. And he used to daven in our shul sometimes, and he loved eating by us Shabbos. And he used to regale us with stories. He would say, I was 57 when I founded Touro. I took my retirement package from YU, and when I did it, they were laughing at me. They said, nobody starts a university at 57. And he told this to me when he was 90, and he had 19,000 students in 29 schools. Touro now is the greatest educator of medical students in the United States, more than Yale or Harvard. They have 9 medical schools. He started it when he was 57 years old. And at 90, he would tell me, let me tell you my 10-year plan. So how do we do the impossible? The Jews do crazy things, right? How do we make a beginning to a circle? Right? And by the way, the circle, I'll tell you how powerful that circle is. It's not just by people who have societal issues. My father told me, he said in Thailand, before they may still do it, I don't know, but before they had gas-powered vehicles, they used to use elephants. So you would have a 6-ton elephant that can pull a tremendous amount. So there was a Westerner in Thailand, and he was amazed, and he said, I just have one question. I understand you trained elephant. What do you tie an elephant to? A horse you tie to the railing. You bang it in. He says, the elephant, it's 6,000, it's 6 tons, 12,000, it'll just take the wall off the house. So he said, this is what we do. When the elephant is, he says, you see there's a chain around the elephant's foot and a ball, a heavy steel ball. He says, we put that on, the elephant stops. He said, how much does that steel ball weigh? It's 25 pounds. He says, come on, that's not going to stop an elephant. And he said, and this is what we do. And this is what they did to all of you. He says, when the elephant is born and it's 4 days old, we put a chain around it with a ball that weighs 25 pounds. And the elephant cannot pick up its leg. And it knows that means to stop. And from then on, its rest of its life, when it weighs 12,000 pounds, when they put the chain around the elephant's foot with the ball there, the elephant knows it can't pick up its foot. It just can't do it. It's too heavy. Right? Think of what they've done to us. They did that to me. That's what society does, right? So how do we create a beginning? And it's dehumanizing. And not only is it dehumanizing, it's incredibly unempowering. Because if in any piece of a circle you could predict it, that means our lives to a certain extent are predetermined. And we lost the ability. And I'll tell you something very powerful here. I'll tell you what we lost. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, 3 books are open on Rosh Hashanah. Chaim, the living, the dead, and those who are trying. And each one has writing in it. But in the Sana Tokef, well, we know what Nasana Tokef is, he adds something very different. He says, V'siftach es sefer hazachronos, you're going to open up the book, V'chosem yad kal adam bo. And your handwriting is in it. Everybody writes in that book. Right? Where did he get it from? I don't know. It doesn't say that in the Gemara. But I think there's something powerful here. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur give us a choice. Do you want to take the pen back of your biography and make it an autobiography? the pen that was given to society, to your friends, to your parents, to your neighbors, to your ego, to whoever. Do you want that pen that you gave away, the chain around your foot, do you think you could wrest it back and start writing your own story? The one you wanted to write when you were young. Right? Yosef, Sarah, and Hannah, they took the pen back. They said, I'm going to write it. Don't tell me my story. She stormed out on her husband. She ran into the Beit HaMikdash. She says, don't tell me that's my, I want to write my story. I tell you, as adults, the avoda of the Aseres Yemei Teshuva is to buy a notebook and a pen and to close the door and start writing your story. Right? One time a year, we're asked, you had your heating inspection, your car inspection, you're a good American, you had your medical inspection, you had your, I don't know what else, there were 17 items, but this one was missing. Did you inspect if you're living the life you want to live? Right? Rabbi Yisrael Salanta said, he said, if we can change just one thing over Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we were very successful. And I say, if the one thing is something we write, this is me, this is the authentic me, this is what I want. You know, there was a nurse, her name was Bonnie Mayer, and she worked in hospices, and she wrote a book, The Things People Regret Before They Die. And she said, the number one thing that people said before they die is, I wish I had lived a life that was more authentic to myself rather than to what other people expected of me. Right? I'll tell you something. I'm not a Breslover, so I can't say it's a miracle. But I was thinking today, yesterday I took a walk and I was thinking about what I would speak about and how I would phrase it. And I have an apartment in the West Side. So I walked in the West Side and I walked into the garden of the Museum of Natural History. And I was amazed. Guess who I saw there? A memorial of Alfred Nobel. And there was an Asian fellow with his dog standing next to the memorial, and I said, I can't believe this. And I went over to it, and it said, Alfred Nobel, inventor, right? Philanthropist, right? Humanist. And I looked at the guy, I said, that was 1 year. It should say, merchant of death, this, that. Do you believe this? And the guy looks at me, he says, oh, I see you feel very strongly about this, and he ran away. In New York, you see everything. And I was standing, and that's what it said. It doesn't mention anything about his prior life. It mentions just that last year. And then I looked at him and I said, Alfred, you old dog, you did it. You did it. You took the pen on the last year of your life, and you said, that's not who I am, and this is who I am. And that's all anybody remembers about you. Only you guys here know, Wikipedia knows the part about him being the merchant of death. I said, you really did it, Alfred. Amazing, right? So I want to go back to the Titan submersible. All of us are one day going to be there. That's how God made the world. It's time for change. Let the new people in, the old people. But when that happens to us, after 120, surrounded by loved ones, when those moments come, we could be thinking about all the mistakes we made and who we didn't say I love you to and who we didn't, the good acts we didn't do and the legacy we didn't leave. Or we could be saying, thank you, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I did what I had to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosh Hashanah. Thank you, Yom Kippur. Thank you, Dovid. Thank you, Michael. A few quick announcements.